And so without much ado, we go straight to the next panel, which will be on copyright infrastructure, copyright metadata, and it will be moderated by Anna Vuopala. Anna is the Senior Ministerial Advisor at the Ministry of Education and Culture in Finland. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, EUIPO. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Veronique, for inviting me. Generative AI is causing disruption. This is something that we can't escape. Yesterday, someone said that we are like kittens in a hurricane. We don't know how long it takes to get on board, back on the surfboard, on the waves of new technologies. But we will do it eventually. Is this the end of disruption? Definitely not. This will just be the beginning, I will say. These disruptions that focus on the core elements of copyright, the creativity of human beings, is something that needs to be addressed sooner than later, and that's why we are here. So I'm happy that we have so many people here who want to contribute to finding new solutions for a tech-resilient copyright system. Alongside regulatory amendments, whenever they are needed, we will always need tools and mechanisms to make copyright work in the AI era. This is particularly true for the European sectors, because we have a fragmented legal framework and we have fragmented markets. This is our concern in particular. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to say a few words about this concept, copyright infrastructure. I did a little poll yesterday evening and tried to ask people whether they understand what copyright infrastructure is. And I really didn't get many answers. And that's the fact that it's an invented word from the governments or the organizations. So the creative sectors don't really use it. But this is only a process. We can make together something of a common copyright infrastructure. We have to work on it. So to understand what the copyright infrastructure is, it's to realize that it has three layers. It has the legal layer, which is the fundamental layer of EU acquis and DSM directive, but in particular also the EU AI Act. But it has, of course, all the systems and services that make the industries gain benefits from the copyright. But what we need to do in the modern copyright infrastructure is to build on the middle layer, the semantic layer that underpins both the legislation and these systems. This is new. This has not been done before, and especially for the whole copyright system. So here we are talking about identifiers and metadata standards that need to be agreed among ourselves. We need to understand what we are talking about and discuss about them together. So EUIP office is one great place to convene these kinds of discussions. We will have to put the creators into focus because the creators depend their livelihoods on the creative activities. But we also need to support the European companies, the creative sectors, but also the SMEs and others who use the copyright system. So we need a cooperation with all of them. And to talk about the semantic layer, we need, of course, work. The CITF, Copyright Infrastructure Task Force, has already started this work. And this is something that you can get familiarized with. No worries, if you haven't heard about it yet, it doesn't matter. You will be able to get on board later. So I just want to, with these words, I want to introduce the panelists. So welcome to the stage, Kai Welp, General Counsel from GEMA. Applause, please. Paul Keller, Director at Policy Open Future Foundation. And finally, Alain Strowel, a professor from UC Louvain. So we have some 25 minutes to discuss. And first of all, I would like to ask first Paul, what's happening now from your perspective? Do you think that the solution will be regulation, or do you think that there will be an opening for something else, like this sort of cooperation for a copyright infrastructure?
Well, that's a big question. I think you pointed to those 3 layers, and I think something is happening on all. Let me focus on the sort of like the technical, semantical, the infrastructure layer that we've been doing some work on, and that, frankly, the EU IPO has done some pioneering work on, right? Like the first time I came here was to discuss the sort of orphan works database. That's a long way ago. That's maybe the first part of the European copyright infrastructure maintained here. The second part is the out of commerce works database, which is actually much bigger. We've been also involved in sort of like helping the EU IPO understand the needs of the cultural heritage sector, the needs of rights holders in this space. And so there's 2 pieces of copyright infrastructure that are already in place here, that are maintained here. And they also clearly show, like, sometimes the law, the regulation, in order to function, requires some form of copyright infrastructure, right? And for both of these, the EU IPO was ready when the obligations came into force. That wasn't easy, like with directives that have a 2-year implementation thing to, like, essentially the moment the directive is finished, they had the blueprint of what they needed to build. In both cases, they were ready. And if we contrast that with sort of what we've just been talking about in generative AI, right, like in this thing, in some degree, like I think we didn't really realize that Article 4, as it's architected, required infrastructure to work. And also, there was, compared to the Orphan Works Directive, compared to Article 8 with the out-of-commerce things, there was no explicit mention of this infrastructure and no explicit assignment. So when this generative AI thing comes into place, we realize we actually have quite a good, balanced legal framework. We have the legal conceptual tools to deal with this challenge, but we were lacking the infrastructure, like these machine-readable opt-outs that suddenly came to the forefront of being like a very, very important tool in order to balance things in the generative AI space. Nobody had an idea how to do them. So we looked at something, like some companies suggested maybe use robots.txt, but it has been like an excruciating process of getting agreement on things, of building things. I think we had heard Mr. Voss talk about like that the EU IPO should have a role in this, that there is also a need to have centralized places. There's the studies being undertaken on sort of like the possibility of a single public opt-out registry. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the moment, but we were too late in this case. And it shows us what the sort of, it's illustrative, like the best regulation can't work if the required infrastructural components aren't there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. How about Alain, your view on this?
Well, I like very much the idea of the copyright infrastructure. I don't like the term, by the way, because for a French speaker, it's difficult to say infrastructure. I remember back in the 90s, we were speaking about information highways, and maybe we could speak about copyright highways, I don't know. But no, it's definitely important, and it's more important than any change of regulation, because I agree, we have the building blocks. And when you look, for instance, at some recent decisions, including the GEMA versus OpenAI, you see that we have a right exception. And of course, we have as well the rights that have been defined. And they have been defined already a long time ago, back in the 1940s for the internet. And we have them in Europe with the CDSM directive for the new internet. So I think there is not much to do there. It's about application and implementation. And there we have, I think, case law that develops in the right direction. Of course, even if we have the foundational legal layer, there are still improvements to do concerning enforcement. And one, I think, is dynamic injunctions. I think there is a connection with Gen AI, because we know after the Bart's versus Anthropic case, for instance, that some of those companies are widely using the so-called shadow libraries, Pilimili, and so on. So we need means to block the development of those pirated libraries online. So there is a link. But of course, I think what is more important is the copyright infrastructure. And there, there are a lot of things to think about. I think we have a collective action problem there. We would be all better off if we would cooperate better, but it's not the case. So I think there is a room for the legislator or for the authorities to unlock this social dilemma that we are all inside. But we can rely on the existing institutions, including CMOs, even if we develop a copyright infrastructure that will require to share a little bit more, but we could discuss then on interoperability. So no change of the framework, but I think that public authorities could nevertheless push for a system that might be a right to remuneration. That was already presented by Martin Zenfleben yesterday. It was alluded to by Axel Voss this morning. I think that is probably a second best solution, but public authorities should push that forward so that parties on the ground will accelerate the pace towards a copyright infrastructure. I think it's a good leverage, and you should tie both so that at the end of the day, maybe we won't have the first best solution because copyright infrastructure is too complicated to set, but at least we would have the right of remuneration in favor of creators, and that might be an unwaivable right. We could discuss that. So there is still room, I think, but it's more to play. The law is something strategic as well, so you have to use all the possibilities of the law in order to move things on the ground.
Thank you so much. Yes. Now to Kai. GEMA had a nice victory with OpenAI just now. So how do you think that this paves the way for solutions in the music industry and more broadly? And also, how do you understand the copyright infrastructure as an element to align with, let's say, which is an important part, of course, of CMO's work as well?
So first of all, to the two decisions or to the two lawsuits we initiated at GEMA. So one is against OpenAI and one is Uno, and we got a very encouraging judgment last week. And this judgment was so important for us because we tried via litigation to enforce our licensing model. And from the outset, we believed that we could not limit our licensing model to the training data. So we believe that we have that territoriality issue with regard to the training data, and so we wanted to license the output as well. And the outcome from our judgment is that we have a small part in the output which we can license, which is the memorization. So if there are protected parts of works or whole works in the output, then all the AI providers need a license from us. So this is really important for us. I believe that CMOs will play an important role in the area of AI. The first thing we heard about that is negotiating power. Of course, we are trying to sell license to the biggest companies in the world. So we need really to come together as authors in collecting societies. So this is an important thing. We learned about buyouts yesterday. So CMOs, from my view, are perfect to prevent buyouts. And which might be the most important thing. We also talked about cultural diversity yesterday. So, and I think in the licensing market of AI, we really need blanket licenses. So we cannot leave the field to individual right holders just making close deals together with the companies. We really need the European works in the licensing market. And another thing is, if it comes to distribution, we will need some kind of collective distribution, I believe, because, and this is back to licensing the output and back to the idea of Martin Zenfleben yesterday. If we can or manage to license the output, then from a technical point, as far as I know, I'm a lawyer, but we have no possibility to link it to the used training data. And so we'll need some kind of collective system for the distribution.
Thank you very much. So do you have a comment on the copyright infrastructure part of this whole thing? I understand you're a lawyer, so it's always difficult, but try.
So I could say something to the idea of a registry for copyrighted or for the ops. We as a collecting society, we do not so much support this idea, at least in the field of music. And the reason for that is that we already have that infrastructure. So we have very good databases with all the rights holders and all the rights. This is our daily business. We are licensing our works to do services like YouTube or Spotify on a work-by-work basis. So this is the technology we built up, and we spent a lot of money on that technology. So, and the second point is, we are always talking about the opt-out in the TDM exception. So I believe in the field of music, it's a bit contradictory, because I don't know any partner in the field of music who hasn't opted out. So all the CMOs have opted out, all the CMOs in Europe, and all the publishers have opted out. So what should be administrated by such a registry? We have the data about the works, and there's only one thing I could attribute to those data. It's we have opted out. So according to me, the companies could just inquire to the representative right holders and ask them if they have opted out for their rights or for the use for TDM, for AA purposes. So we do not believe that we need in the field of music. It might be different in other fields, that double infrastructure.
Yes, infrastructure, of course, is broader than just the registry. So we are definitely talking about a common middle layer, which is the layer of semantically describing who are the writers, who are the authors, who are the works, and how to describe these rights in a machine-readable way. And here, the distribution of remunerations, even in the CMOs, there are areas of efficiency that can be achieved with these works. But to go to the next question, challenges of developing a modern copyright infrastructure. You, Alain, already mentioned some of them, which is how to get the parties together, how to get mutually beneficial interest. Do you want to share something here? What do we need in order for a copyright infrastructure to be modernized?
Okay, well, I think I'm here because we are finishing a study for the EU IPO on the mapping of metadata database and on the standardization of those metadata. And that's something that has to be done by engineers. So Philippe Rixon, who I think is in the room, has been the leading person in this project. We need engineers, but lawyers can play the role of social engineers, and it's important because it's not only about the definition of data formats, about finding the ways to make the database interoperable. It's as well about social engineering. So we need lawyers as well for the governance aspect. But so far, as a summary, so we have interviewed about 30, or exactly 31 organizations dealing with copyright metadata. It's a mix of private and public organizations, so national libraries were interviewed among others. The study is not yet finalized. It will be released beginning of next year, but we already see a few mega trends. Maybe it's not surprising, but we were surprised to find that there are more databases covering a particular creative sector than we expected. We have identifications code, but sometimes the information about a particular creator vary from one database to the other. We discover as well that there is more legal diversity and legal uncertainty than expected. There are some issues with the IP framework, but there is as well GDPR. Sometimes it's used as an excuse as well not to move forward in terms of interoperability, standardization. There might be trade secret issues. There might be issues with the mandates that some actors have, like national libraries, which might block the development of the infrastructure. Another takeaway is that there are more IT providers than we thought, and sometimes they are quite small. So that's really the basic layer, but it's important as well, even if there is some standardization of the data formats. The metadata schemes are less based on international standards than expected. So we are a little bit surprised there. I mean, I could continue, but it's clear that for many stakeholders, the proposal of the AIPO to have a copyright view at some point after the Copyright Knowledge Center is seen with positive eyes. It would help some actors, for instance, national libraries, as well to have a role outside their national borders. And this copyright view, if it's set up, it should focus on upstream data, so close to the moment of creation. It should not be involved with downstream data, which is the data needed for the exploitation. So we should focus mainly on the identifiers and the first stage. I could go more into details, but I think the study will be released, and it's better for an audience that does not comprise engineers as well. So that's it.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, that study that you're working on is a crucial component of the whole copyright infrastructure initiatives, which one part is, of course, the opt-out registry that was mentioned. Another was what Paul mentioned earlier was this public domain works registry, and the foundational layer that the CITF first project is proposing is to work together with different industries on how to validate those different technical requirements that were analyzed in that report. Final question round that I would like to ask of you is that, which I think you already mentioned, that there is a role for public authorities. But what kind of role would you like to have? I understood that more or less the music industry considered that there is no room or no need, in particular for a public administration to amend or change anything. But how about the idea of participating from the point of view that you know, for instance, in the music industry, a lot of new musicians and performers are coming up on a daily basis. We see more and more young generation artists that do not know about copyright organizations and not necessarily wanting to be there. So would you like to be a part of a system where we can develop a tech-resilient copyright infrastructure and thereby get benefits also for new customers, for CMOs, for instance? So this is a question to you, and I will ask small questions. We have 5 minutes, so small replies also from Paul and Alain.
Okay, of course, we need public authorities. We need your help. I think the most important role is just that you support the cooperation between the different stakeholders. So this, from my perspective, is the key role of public authorities. But as you mentioned, I believe that education and training will be a very important thing in the field of copyright in the future and in the AI area. Because yesterday we talked about a new generation which uses those chatbots and all the machines, and I believe some of them don't even know that these machines were trained with works, with human works, and so it's quite important to stress the role of the human creators, and so you should give all that information into the market, and I think the new center is just perfect for such a role.
Thank you very much. And Paul?
Yeah, I think a number of things have been mentioned already. Like infrastructure cannot solve all the problems, right? Like, and we see this sort of sometimes like the sectors already have their own infrastructure. I also think that fundamentally the more sort of like distributive remuneration type problems are probably better addressed through systems like the one that Martin Senftleben yesterday presented. I do think copyright infrastructure and public copyright infrastructure has a place where we have sort of information discovery problems, where there is not enough information, where sort of not all copyright works, like the music sector really is, I think, an exception in that sense. Not all copyright works are actively managed by professional organizations or even by the individual creators. Sometimes that is just like in disproportionate burden. There's not enough economic incentives, and I think that is where sort of these infrastructural components can step in, and where public authorities have a responsibility to step in. Like the examples are indeed like the orphan works, the out-of-commerce works, the work that we're currently doing on developing a registry-based, like a pilot registry for public domain and openly licensed works, which is built also on standards like the International Standard Content Code, which tries to implement this idea of a sort of like a standards-first approach to registry building, which we have currently a prototype that is available. We will launch this as a fuller prototype also with more entities contributing to this in January next year. But there is a space for public authorities. And I want to come back to one thing, like I think we've seen a sort of like a tendency of regulators in this space also to delegate some of their responsibility to standards making bodies. And I think we're running into the limitations of this at the moment, right? Like the discussions around opt-out standards at the moment, they are taking place under a lot of pressure from regulators, from different things. We know, Sylvie has pointed this out, we have a very fragmented copyright system, which gives us very different points of departure for even finding common language to address these things. And I think to some degree there is also, this has taught us, and if we want to continue this, I like your presentation of Europe as the rapid prototyping shop of copyright infrastructure. If you're in the middle of it, it feels anything but rapid, but like I think on the global level it still is. If we want to do that to some degree, like we also need to have like regulators need to take their role and need to step in and sort of also need to take decisions, because like just pushing complexity down to sort of regulatory frameworks that are like global in nature slows things down and limits our ability to intervene here.
Thanks, Paul. I really think what you emphasize is that we need everybody. We can't do only technical, we can't do only with the legal, we need everybody's input in a copyright infrastructure. Alain, still, you mentioned about the role of cultural heritage institutions and how important they are because of their data that they hold. So basically, combining infrastructures would be a step forward that would help also CMOs, which would not take over anything, it would just combine them. But please, you have 1 minute and a little bit less.
Yeah, well, thank you. Much has been said, and I agree with what Paul said on the limits of standardization, although we should push for standardization, but there are some limitations there. So that's why there is a room as well for public authorities to move beyond that and to improve interoperability. Now, I want to mention to start with, because that struck me yesterday, I was reading an op-ed of Jimmy Wales, the co-founder of Wikipedia, and that's the open internet. But he said what we need to build trust on the internet is structural transparency. And I'm reading, every platform that mediates information should make provenance visible, where data originated, how it was processed, and what uncertainties surround it. I think that's a very good program, not only for the open internet, but as well for copyright that aims at remunerating authors. So, and there is a room for public authorities that should play, I think, as I mentioned, with some proposal as well to push the actors to move forward for the copyright infrastructure. So I mentioned already the unwaivable right of remuneration that might not be the best solution, but if we don't succeed with the copyright infrastructure, at least it would be there, and that's already very good. But I think for EU authorities, I think we should even think further, and I'm a little bit more provocative there, but we have been, as academics, advocating for unitary copyright for quite a long time. I think that might be important because it might be linked with a voluntary registration to which many advantages could be associated with. And that would really be the future, I think, for copyright, because we would have a unitary title for the whole EU, and then it becomes a bit more easier to have cross-border licensing, to have cross-border enforcement, and all the rest. But I stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alain. I think we are out of time. So to summarize, I think we got a mandate as government representatives, as the public authorities, to help the different stakeholders in the creative sectors to work on a modernized copyright infrastructure. We can name it another name. It doesn't matter. It's just that we work on it. So thank you very much, and applause for the panel.